possible, but this new guy that came in the last time, you know, the Maverick, the one that was like, I'm going to do something different, he was able to get so many things done, good, bad, or ugly. He was still able to accomplish that. So are you saying that the longer you are a politician, the less you can get done?
That was a Biden supporter, folks. Welcome back. It was one of the disappointed Democratic voters we met on a trip to Georgia this week. Perfect grist for our panel. Symone Sanders, former chief spokeswoman for Vice President Kamala Harris, and soon to be a host on MSNBC. Welcome. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker, and New York Times' chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, and former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo. Well, Symone, you get the first question. You got to defend what's going on there. I want to put up our breakdown of the president's job approval rating because it really shows you the parts of the coalition. Everybody in the coalition's not happy. From Bernie Sanders to, I always joke, to Bernie Sanders to John Kasich, right? Like everybody in between here. With independents, his job ratings fell 25 points. With African Americans, 19, 18 to 34, 16, Latinos, 11, women, 10. And this is all basically from the first 4 months to now. What's your take on how this, let me put it this way. How's the White House handling this moment?
So I think the clip that you played, Chuck, really illuminates what is happening across the country and how the White House, and I would argue the Democratic Party apparatus, is viewing it as a whole. There's a disconnect, to state the obvious, between what voters and the American people think their elected leaders have done and what the elected leaders have actually done. And I'm sure that's very frustrating and scary for the White House and the Democratic Party apparatus, because the first year of the Biden-Harris administration was actually designed to demonstrate that government can work for the American people. You know, President Biden talks about it all the time. Vice President Harris has talked about it. But and you can see that in the 200 million people vaccinated, the 6.9 million jobs created, the passage of the American Rescue Plan that allotted for those monthly CTC payments and lowered health care premiums and sometimes eliminated them for some folks across the country. But there is a disconnect. And so the White House has to figure out a way to bridge that gap, and that's what you're going to continue to see from them, I think.
All right, Carlos, do you agree that this is a message problem that he has, not a substance problem?
I think Joe Biden's biggest challenge is that he's not being himself. Joe Biden has a record over 50 years of being a pragmatist, a consensus builder, someone who worked with Republicans, worked with Democrats. When he was vice president, President Obama would send him to negotiate with Mitch McConnell. They pulled him back sometimes because he was too willing to negotiate. And all of a sudden, he became the face of the most progressive, ambitious policy that the Democratic Party has tried to advance in a generation. The same Joe Biden who ran in the primaries as the mainstream or moderate candidate, the same Joe Biden who told independents, and we see that big drop, that he was going to help heal this country, that he was going to be the president of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. I think a lot of these voters have found him to be a partisan. And that was a surprise because he was supposed to be different than Donald Trump. Donald Trump was divisive. Yeah. Joe Biden was supposed to bring us together and to heal us.
You know, Peter, it did strike me that the president is aware that he's lost a little bit of his political identity when he had to bring up Bernie Sanders to say, I'm not. Remember, he's the socialist, I'm the capitalist.
Yeah, no, exactly right. No, look, he is trying to struggle to define himself, right? And he had run as the anti-Trump, and the coalition was unified by this one thing. They all hated Trump. They wanted him gone. But that didn't mean that they all agreed on a lot of very important issues, and that they had not settled those just because they elected Joe Biden. They elected him with 50-50 Senate and a House only slightly more Democratic. They didn't give him the wherewithal to accomplish necessarily some of the big and most ambitious things that they wanted to. So you hear even Senator Sanders say today, let's find ways of breaking down the package and see what will pass and what won't pass. That's a big change.
So, Kristen, you've been doing a lot of reporting. What is next? Is it the Electoral Count Act? Is it universal pre-K? What is the chunk he goes after next to put a point on the scoreboard?
Well, they are going to work on the Electoral Count Act, which would, of course, fortify the way in which the electoral votes are counted. But I do think there's going to be a key focus on a scaled-back version of the Build Back Better package, what you were talking about with Congresswoman Slotkin, and I think they are going to go after things where they think they can find bipartisan support, like lowering the costs of child care, like expanding health care. Prescription drugs is going to be a big piece of that as well, but there's also going to be a reset in messaging. That's the one thing the president can control. So I am told he's going to be at shovel-ready projects, talking about his infrastructure law, what he's already done. He's going to be at schools where they're imposing broadband internet access. So I think it's messaging and policy.
You know, Simone, how much of this lack of being able to get out of the White House, obviously COVID has a lot to do with it. You know, I look back, you guys got to go through a campaign where you didn't really have to go around the country. How much of has that hurt, do you think, in ways that you just can't really calculate?
I think a lot. And to be clear, and during the campaign, then candidate Biden wanted to go out across the country. He relishes being with people, making his case directly to them, being at the barbershops, the beauty shops, in the diners with folks, hosting a town hall and taking their questions. And he has been unable to largely do that due to COVID. And I do think that the implications of COVID have not really been explored by tables like these in a very fulsome way, because the reality is, it's not if the president or vice president get COVID, they're down for 10 days. Like, let's just fact. Yeah. That is a fact. We just have to go with the facts. And so a lot of the things that are happening under the umbrella of, okay, what can we do to make sure it's still safe?
I want to bring up a quick troubling number that we had in our poll. 76%, 3 in 4 of everybody we surveyed, said that our democracy is under threat. But look at the differences of why among Republicans. And by the way, it's basically even among Republicans and Democrats agreeing with this statement now. Republicans say it's because of Democrats and liberals, and it's the socialism, and they're going too far to the left. You don't see the election fraud even come up in a lot here. Democrats basically agree on one reason why they think the democracy is under threat. It is Donald Trump. But this is, Peter Baker, a pretty concerning overall. The rationales may not matter if everybody agrees that our democracy is crumbling.
We're at a moment in our society that I don't think a lot of us ever expected to be, right? Where we're questioning the very foundations of things that we took for granted for decades, for generations. I don't think we ever sort of thought, growing up, I didn't anyway, that this would ever be at risk. We always assumed that the system would be, tested, that there would be crises and challenges, but not that the fundamental nature of who America is would be in question. And I think a lot of people are questioning that today from different ideological points of view and from different angles. But it's a different moment, I think, than we've seen.
It's a bit scary, especially because it isn't for the same reasons.
Right.
And that's what makes it even harder.
And no consensus what to do about it.
No consensus on what to do.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.